this is a good time to play the clip. You're right. Tonight's Shoutout is a little bit different. We're going to talk with Chris Nineham about the UK election soon. But we really just want to urge you in whatever way we can.
Can I play the... Can I play the song?
Play what?
The song for the Shoutout?
Oh, yeah, please. Of course. Shout out, shout out, shout out.
My brain is still in recovery mode.
It's such a good shout out, shout out, shout out.
My brain is still in recovery mode.
Shout out
from taking in so many high-level.
I feel like there's a dim-wittedness and posturing that goes lib dem. But of course, he's very, he's a right-winger. So there's obviously the Tories. But I could see him getting enlisted to do some type of like Brexit channel for like Nigel, for like looking at Nigel Farage telling him he could call him like slurs or whatever.
What it really depends on is if a Lib Dem will sit down with him and come to LA or not. Because if
Joe
not, then
Swinson had an interview with me.
Exactly. If Joe Swinson came,
if Joe Swinson
talk about
came,
markets.
That would be so awesome if like Dave Rubin does World War II. And it was just all like totally contradictory because it was just based on pure. It's like, well, I supported Churchill and Hitler because they both talked to me.
Dave would immediately put it in an American context, be like, yeah, I just feel like the Democrats and Republicans, it's like Labor and Tory. But you guys are trying something different. It's actually the idea.
So you're liberal Democrats, but you're not like liberal Democrats, though, right? Wow, you're blowing my mind.
You should have called yourself the classical liberals.
They're basically the closest party in the world to that dumb description of oneself. Friends don't let friends vote liberal Democrat. Guys, you got to vote for the Labour Party. You have to vote for them. I mean, look, honestly, in our case, our prospects are not bad. Bernie Sanders is surging. And the struggle goes on in any scenario, UK, United States, wherever, because the stakes are so fundamental. But if you guys, after 10 years of being devastated by these governments, reject an option for basic humanity and delivery now, you're locking in. I mean, devastating cuts, privatization, and also a geostrategic future that's delusional. The UK is not going to become the next Dubai or Singapore or anything like that, even if that's what you want. Power is not shifting towards the Atlantic. It's shifting towards the Pacific. And I'm talking now in very capitalist terms. This is not like, that's where investment is going. That's where economies are growing. That's where the most of the population is. That is where the new geostrategic balance is coming from with China. And so you've already owned gold with Brexit, and you've been destroying your social fabric for 10 years. And you want to do more of that? Gordon Brown was the political partner and fierce rival of Tony Blair. And obviously, I mean, Tony Blair is clearly, just a political figure of the right. But Gordon Brown is somebody who, both for contextual, historical, and ideological reasons, embraced neoliberalism while attempting, and under his reign of Chancellor of the Exchequer, some actual redistribution. I think it's very important to watch what he said on UK television just the other day about the stakes of this election, because he's not only right about the UK, this does have some global ramifications.
Do you look at the Labour Party now and think they're ready for government?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn is a phenomenon. We've got to accept that. He may have disagreed with me on many issues, but I respect...
Certainly did.
Well, he probably voted against me about 500 times.
Did he ever vote with you?
Sometimes. But I respect the fact that he's a phenomenon. And he is expressing people's anger about universal credit, about what happened at Grenfell Towers, about affordable housing, about inequality in our country, about tuition fees. And he is articulating that anger. It's absolutely clear to me that the old neoliberal consensus, which was basically inequality was good for growth and you never have deficit financing because that is building up unacceptable debt, that's all gone. It's completely discredited. It took 10 years from the financial recession for it to be discredited. I couldn't win the argument about a stimulus for the economy in 2010. People were worried about debt and deficits and thought that that was the equivalent of incest. I couldn't win the argument with the people, and I regret that, because we then had 7 years of wasted austerity, and this is a lost decade. But now people have come, both internationally and in Britain, to the view that the right form of economic policy is where you can combine social justice, economic efficiency, and environmental sustainability, and there is a new wave of support for what you might call collective action in this country. And
that's it. And by the way, because Boris Johnson and Dominique Cummings are smart, they understand that the sweet spot is some form of social center-right politics and lying. I mean, he says, look, I reject austerity. I'm going to pump a ton of money into schools and NHS. And his numbers have been bullshit. He's talking about future investments that are already allotted for. He's got no answer on the crisis in the NHS because of underinvestment, where you have children sleeping on coats who have pneumonia. When he gets asked about this by a reporter, he blows it off. You guys have a choice. And there's a lot of drama, and there's endless smears about Jeremy Corbyn. If you're worried about anti-Semitism and the rise of alt-right forces, that's another reason you need to vote for Labour. And vote for the only political factor in this race, namely Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, and Diane Abbott, who have been fighting against racism and fascism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia for decades, while the Tory party has flirted with it and aided it. And honestly, the best case they can summon forward of a ultra sympathetic source to Toryism like Andrew Sullivan is that they've neutralized it by absorbing some of it. Right? Like, that's their most strategic, devious argument they have for what they've done. And yet all we hear all day is because somebody supports Palestinian human rights that they're anti-Semitic. And that's already being used as a proxy against Bernie Sanders here. So don't fuck around. Vote for the Labour Party.
I mean, especially when you're talking about just such a nasty, horrific, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim party that we're seeing the Conservative Party deform into. It's always been there, but it's very much coming up to the surface. This Labour manifesto is probably one of the more radical and interesting movements in the West politically today.
Totally.
Absolutely transformative. It's going to not only be able to address climate change at the scale that it needs to be addressed, but doing so in a way that's going to bring in so many people who have been left behind in the UK. In a lot of ways, the United States and the UK have very similar trajectories over the past few decades, where massive amounts of financialization have completely decimated the working class in both of these societies, and things that were thought of as just like the normal path of life have been eradicated. There's a lot of young people who don't have a lot of options going forward. There's a lot of worry. And in that kind of moment, you have, the racists and the xenophobes who try to, take advantage of that fear to turn people into right-wingers. Or we have the opportunity on the left, which is always looking forward. We don't live in the past. We say, you know what? We have an opportunity now to rebuild the world, and we're going to do it. And that's exactly what the Labour Party represents. It's absolutely the kind of movement that you're going to want to be a part of going forward. And for the sake of the planet, please do it. Please.
Yeah, for real. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.